Welcome back to the brass class. This is lesson 2. Some of the things that we went over in lesson 1 include how to sit, how to open your case, how to buzz, how to hold your instrument, and how to play a C. If you need to review any of those things, please go back to lesson 1 so that you can be caught up for lesson 2. Now, for lesson 2, we're going to start off talking about 2 essential elements of making music. One of them being rhythm, and the other one being pitch. Rhythm means how long we play a note for. So for instance, in the last video, I was playing the C for 8 beats. My rhythm would be 2 whole notes tied together. Some other examples of rhythm that we have can be seen here. We have a quarter note, which equals 1 beat, a half note, which equals 2 beats, and a whole note, which equals 4 beats. You may have seen these before. This may be completely new to you, but every time you see a quarter note, it looks like this. Every time you see a half note, it will look like this. And every time you see a whole note, it will look like this. Now, when we see those, we would produce a sound on those notes. However, we also have specific rests that show us how long to rest or to not play for. For instance, this would be a quarter rest, which means that you rest for 1 beat. This would be a half rest, meaning that you rest for 2 beats. And this would be a whole rest, meaning that you rest for 4 beats. So just like you play a quarter note for 1 beat, you would rest on a quarter rest for 1 beat. Now we also have things called time signatures. For instance, 4/4, 3/4, 2/4 are all examples of time signatures. And this may seem really confusing, or you may think it relates to fractions and math, but that's not quite it. These are actually very simple once you learn them. The top number stands for how many beats is in one measure of music. So for instance, the top number in 4/4 is 4, meaning that in one measure there are 4 beats. And we'll talk about measures a little bit more later, but that's how we separate our rhythms into measures. So in this case, we have 3/4, our top number being 3. That means that each measure has 3 beats. And so on, 2/4 has 2 beats in each measure. Now the bottom number is a little bit different, but it's still pretty simple once you learn it. The bottom number stands for which type of note gets the beat. So in this case, the 4 would mean that a quarter note gets the beat. And for the most part, during this video series, we'll stick in 4/4, but you can see things like 6/8 or 2/2 are also very common. Those are time signatures that don't have a 4 in the bottom, but we'll talk about that later. Now that we've talked about rhythms and time signatures, I also want to talk about pitches, because the definition of music is the art of sound in time. We've covered our time, rhythm. Now we need to talk about sound, our pitches. Pitches is just another word for how high or how low a note sounds. In music, the way that we read pitches is on a staff. A staff is a collection of 5 lines and 4 spaces. In this case, I have a treble clef on this staff, which tells me which note goes on which line and which note goes in which space. Let's go ahead and start with the spaces. In our treble clef, an easy way to remember the notes in the spaces is face in the space. All face in the space means is that you write out the word face, F-A-C-E, in each space, starting from the bottom, working your way up to the 4th space, which means every time we see a note in the first space, it would be an F, in the second space, it's an A, and so on for C and E. These are the notes in the spaces of the treble clef. Now moving on to the notes that are located on the lines of the treble clef, we have a few ways of remembering this. Some people's favorites are every good boy deserves fudge, or every good boy does fine, or one of my favorites, elephants get big dirty feet. Those are some helpful ways that can remind you of the names of the notes on the lines of the treble clef. So that is, starting from the bottom, E, G, B, D, and F. Every good boy does fine. Now you may notice that there's an E on the first line and that there's an E on the fourth space. This is because there's only 7 notes in our musical alphabet, A through G, which means that we repeat them once we get to the end. So we go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then repeat A, B, C, and so on. So if we would put all of this together, we would have E on the first line, F in the first space, G on the second line, A on the second space, and so on, moving up the lines of the staff. We have one more concept to talk about, and that is ledger lines. Ledger lines are just the name of the lines that we give to notes that may extend beyond the 5 lines of the staff. So for instance, the C that we played in the last lesson, lesson 1, was on the first ledger line below the staff. Now, as you can see, we extended a line by drawing it, and this is where our C sits, on the first ledger line below the staff. We're going to be learning another note today, and that is called D. And while we don't have a ledger line for D, that does extend beyond the staff right here. Now that was a lot of music theory that I just threw at you, talking about pitches and rhythms. I want to get playing now. So go ahead, take a moment to pause the video now and open the case. Now that your case is opened, go ahead and grab your mouthpiece. Take a moment now, pause the video, and practice producing a good buzz on your mouthpiece. Remember, buzz just equals vibration, and the only 2 things that we need for vibration is good air and firm corners. Now, just to go over a few things, remember, a good buzz should sound nice and steady with a good, strong tone. Some examples of bad buzzes include when your throat may be tight, or when your lips in the center are too tight, or when you're using too much air, or when your corners are too loose, or any combination of these. Remember, we want to have good, strong air with firm corners. Continue to practice your buzzing, but if you're starting to have success with holding out a steady pitch, I'm going to challenge you to do 2 things. 1, raise your pitch by increasing your airspeed and keeping your corners nice and firm. And 2, lowering your pitch by relaxing your airspeed and relaxing into the sound. Here's an example of what it sounds like to play higher. All I did was I blew faster air and I strengthened my corners. Here's an example of playing lower. How I did that was by slowing my airspeed and by relaxing into the sound. What I just played was an example of a siren, starting from low and going high, or starting from high and going low. And you can even combine them to sound like this. Go ahead and take a moment to pause the video and practice playing some sirens. Now, remember, learning an instrument, especially a brass instrument, means that we have to build upon foundations. The first foundation would be having a good, steady buzz. If you're still struggling to have a good, steady buzz, I encourage you to continue to practice that. If you're having success with a good, steady buzz, then I would encourage you to practice your sirens. Never move on too quickly for fear of being left behind, because everybody learns at their own pace, and you can go back to the last lesson for more review. And remember, nothing beats good practice at home. Now that we've talked about creating a steady buzz and playing a siren from low to high, high to low, and combined, I want to start adding rhythm into our playing. Now the way that we should be starting each note is with our tongue. Say the phrase, Tip of the tongue to the top of the teeth. Try saying it faster. Tip of the tongue to the top of the teeth. Tip of the tongue to the top of the teeth. Now when you say that phrase, where does the tip of your tongue go? It should be going to the top of your teeth. For example, place your tongue on the roof of your mouth. Now, slowly slide it forward until you touch the back of your teeth. Where the back of your teeth and the roof of your mouth meet is where the tip of your tongue should hit as you tongue. Tip of the tongue to the top of the teeth. Now some things to avoid. Your tongue should never go in between your teeth. It should always stay behind your top teeth. Your tongue should not get in the way of your air or your firm corners. Rely on your air and allow your tongue to move freely. If you noticed, my air kept moving, and all that changed was the tip of my tongue hitting the top of my teeth. Something that may help you visualize this is imagine that you're holding a water hose, and you have it on and there's water coming out. Let the water represent your air. Let my hand represent the tongue. The water is coming out, and in order to tongue, our hand just separates the water nice and cleanly. The water keeps moving forward, but we still see separation with the tongue. In the same way, when you are using your tongue, your air should continue to move freely. Now, when we start each note, we should be trying to use our tongue to start that note. Here's what it sounds like if I do not use my tongue to start the note. Beginning was not very clear, and it was very undefined. Here's an example of if I do use my tongue to start the note. The beginning was clear, defined, and good sound from the beginning. Take a moment now to pause the video and, on your mouthpiece, practice starting your sounds with the tongue. Try to hold each note for 4 beats, or as we learned today, a whole note. Now that you've practiced having a good sound on your mouthpiece and starting that sound with your tongue, go ahead and put it into your instrument, and we're going to play a few Cs. Remember, a C on our valved instruments is played with no fingers. On a trombone, it's in first position. That means all the way in. Here's an example of a C. Now that we've talked about pitch and rhythm, we're going to try to put them together with a piece of music. This piece of music is called See Me Now. See Me Now has 8 lines of 4 measures, and they only have the note C. So we're going to have a good opportunity to practice producing a good C while also practicing the rhythms that we have learned today. For See Me Now, we're going to use a rehearsal technique called I play, you play, which means I'll play the first line, and then you'll pause the video, and you'll play the first line. Do this as many times as you need before moving on to the second line. Be sure to have your metronome handy so that you can practice keeping good time with good rhythms. I have my metronome set to 80 beats per minute. If this is too fast, feel free to lower it to a smaller number. Remember to start the sound with your tongue. Here's line 2. Rest, 2, 3. Rest, 2, 3. Here is line 3. Remember, have a good breath in and start the sound with your tongue. Here is line 4. This one has some tricky rests. Make sure that you're counting. I like to think of rests not as a time to rest, but as a time to be actively silent, following along with the music. is line number 5. And rest. Here's line number 6. Next we're going to play line number 7. Now we're combining whole notes and half notes. Here's line number 8, the last line. Feel free to go back to another line if you need to, but I'll move on to playing all of See Me Now in a row, all 8 lines. And that's the end of lesson 2. Feel free to go back and play however much of this you want, or even go back to lesson 1 to review. For this week, you should be practicing how to produce a good tone on your mouthpiece. You should review your rhythms and the pitches on the treble clef, as well as playing See Me Now. Remember, no matter how good you do in class, it is not a substitute for good at-home practice. See you next time.